The aim is to stop the intention of the National Broadcasting Corporation to carry out this directive to shut down these three broadcast stations. This is against the backdrop of, according to the NBC, the failure of these broadcast stations to pay the licensing fees or renew same to operate. But we find that this action may not necessarily be lawful, particularly given the context of how important freedom of expression is to Nigerians and the role they would play in the upcoming 2023 elections. And there are also other ancillary issues too, as to the nature of the fees itself, the quantum of the fees, how much notice they've been given. And so we think that the benefit of having people exercise their freedom of expression to have access to information from these media platforms much more outweigh whatever interest the regulatory agencies may be trying to protect. And that is also against the background of what we've seen as abuse of power by NBC time and again.
But Kola, some people are of the opinion that these stations knew what they were getting themselves into. In order to operate, you have to meet certain regulations. If they fail to meet the regulations, including the payment of fees, then it is their problem and not necessarily undermining the freedom of speech or expression as protected by the Constitution. How do you respond to that?
And yes, the media stations are aware of some of the obligations, including payment to renew their license. But we must understand that freedom of expression is a constitutional provision, which naturally by the Constitution itself will prevail against any other law, including the NBC Act itself and any other subsidiary legislation. This is not to challenge the mandate of the NBC to regulate the broadcast industry. It is to state clearly what the law says, that regulation is to emphasize, as to enable the freedom of expression, not to stifle it.
SERAP argues that the threat to shut down the broadcast stations was neither necessary nor proportionate, and if carried out would offend the legal principles of equity and equality of access to mass communication. What does that mean?
It means that the provisions of the fundamental human rights as it is in the Nigerian Constitution can only be derogated from according to well-known international standards and even as contained in this Constitution. And some of these three-part tests, which is well-known in international law, would mean that legality, proportionality, and necessity. And so in this case, we would ask, is it legal? While the NBC has the powers to regulate the broadcast industry, this action cannot be said to be legal as it does not conform with the statutory provisions of freedom of expression. And so we ask again, is it necessary? Not necessarily. This action or this threat on the part of the NBC is not necessary. There are better ways that the NBC can use to ensure that these broadcast houses pay their dues. But this mass shutdown is not necessary in this context. Again, within the sphere within which they operate, the present socio-economic situation in Nigeria and the upcoming 2023 elections. And thirdly, is this proportionate? No. The interest of Nigerians to freedom of expression outweighs whatever concerns or regulation that the NBC is trying to protect.